everyone, and welcome to Evolve's webinar sessions. Really excited to have all of you here, and thank you so much for joining. So today we have a really interesting topic, something that is very thought-provoking that we're going to be discussing today. We're going to talk about learning to learn. So it is something which should be relatable to all of us because we've been learning all our lives. But do we really stop and consider and think, what are we really doing? Like, are we just consuming knowledge, consuming information, but is it contributing to learning or not? And what are the different ways that we could adapt so that we can learn better? So to help us out with this, we have a fantastic speaker today. He is Dr. Kishan PKV. So Kishan basically started his career as a design engineer, post which he finished his PhD from IIM Ahmedabad, and currently he's an assistant professor at IRMA, teaching macroeconomics, game theory, and behavioral economics. His primary research focuses on education. So there couldn't have been a better person to help us out with this. Before we move on, let me just explain what are we going to cover in the webinar today. So first, we'll be covering what is learning. Then we move on to why do we really learn, like what is the need for it. Next is where do we learn from? And finally, how do we learn better? So these are mainly the things that we'll be covering. So just one more thing before we get started. We also have a design community on WhatsApp. So that is something that you can check out. We have a lot of Ask Me Anything sessions, a webinar like these. We have a couple of creative challenges that you could participate in. You could meet your fellow designers or people who are aspiring to be designers, or even meet professionals over there and really connect and bond with them. So the information is on the screen. So if you want to join, we would be happy to have you over there. So yes, without further ado, Kishan, the floor is all yours now.
All right, so let's begin with the most basic of all questions once we start trying to understand what learning is. So what exactly is learning? Now at the first glance, it just seems like a very fundamental, very easy question to answer because we've all spent our time, our life in schools, colleges, we've attended coaching classes, we attended training programs, we've attended workshops, tutorials, and we engage with a lot of YouTube content. And then we also have AI. So we all surely know what learning is, but I want you to think more carefully about when do we say that someone has actually learned something, all right? And before we actually go on to define learning, it is useful to say what learning is not, right? And that brings me to the next slide. The question is learning the same as studying? When you say that someone is studying something, all right, so is it when a person sits in the classroom, reading a chapter, underlining a paragraph, watching a tutorial, completing a course, remembering something until the exam, writing it in the exam, collecting certificates, collecting degrees, and so on and so forth. So that is in general what studying is supposed to be all about. All right. But the fact that we study, does it mean the same as we are actually learning something? The answer is no. These are the activities that might support learning, but they are not learning by themselves. All right. So that brings me to the main point. The learning is not the same as studying. All right. A person may attend every class and still not learn. A person might simply maintain 100% attendance, but still might not learn. A person might read 52 books, a book each week in a year, but still might not learn. A person might watch 10 videos on design, coding, finance, music, investments, and so on and so forth, and still not carry out whatever the intended purpose for this particular person consuming this information. All right, a person can actually maintain a streak on an app. And here I will talk about myself. Maintain a streak on an app, but yet not learn something sizable. All right. So here I talk about my Duolingo experience. I've been maintaining a streak on Duolingo, and it dates back to, I think, year 2022. Or in fact, year 2021, second half. And so it's been 1787 days. So I maintained a streak of 1787 days. All right. But I would not be able to hold even a half decent, forget decent, quarter decent conversation with any German. All right. So the fact that I maintained this streak, the fact that I've been doing all these lessons all this while, does it mean I have learned? Well, the answer is no. I went to Austria, I've been to Germany, I've been able to read a few billboards, I've been able to follow a few German words, but I cannot, with full confidence, say that I've learned German. All right. So the point I want to make here is that studying is only an activity, whereas learning is an outcome. All right. And we will define what learning truly is as an outcome. So here I want to take a chance, take an opportunity and ask all of you, you have all learned all this while in your life. Just think about one good experience from your life. It could be from your school, it could be from your undergrad, graduate studies, from your colleague, from your business, from your teacher. There could be n number of places where you could have learned something. And think about one good learning experience. What has actually made it a good learning experience? I would like to open the floor for responses. Yeah. So what has constituted a good learning experience? What made for a good learning experience?
So we have some responses on the chat. Yeah, Sam says, I personally have watched many videos and I often have just two questions. One, am I watching the right things? And if not, how can I make sure I'm watching the right things? And two, how can I actually apply this or think of some task that I can do to actually learn?
Okay, so I actually want to understand the characteristics of what made it a good learning experience, right? So it could be because I felt safe. It could be because it fueled my curiosity further, or it could be a bad experience because I felt frightened. I simply felt frightened. I was just put off with the entire demeanor of the teacher teaching me. I was put off by the language a certain teacher used. So I'm trying to understand those particular aspects, but I will move ahead. I'll have more chances.
I actually have something to add there. And that question I sent before the slide. So sorry about that.
Okay.
I think I have had one experience. Even in my school days, my tuition teachers, whenever I had some success with them, is when I challenged their thinking, they were not afraid to, entertain what thoughts I have. And oftentimes I have had a bad experience when they didn't like that I challenged their thinking. It's not going in the manner they wanted to. And the second positive thing I've had is it was a cohort and it was very structured and they had a lot of tasks to apply everything that they were learning. So we were learning and then we were doing some activities. So it was, I think, double something like I was learning it theoretically also and I was doing it practically also. So that really helped. Those were some positive things.
Fantastic. So yeah, so the next slide, I have tried to put together some of the good characteristics, some of the characteristics of good learning and bad learning, and you truly have hit the hammer on the nail. So one of the things that good learning experience must entail is the safety to make mistakes. All right. Is the safety you feel in the entire learning environment. It should also come with great feedback. Now, feedbacks can be good and bad. So good feedback is what I refer to when I refer to good learning. And good feedback means that the teacher or the learning experience is able to show the holes, the loopholes in your learning. All right. And that counts for a good feedback when it comes to a learning experience. Curiosity, I believe, is one of the foremost things of importance when it comes to learning. If the learning process entails, whether it be learning from a teacher, whether it be learning from a video, whether it be learning from a book, if that lends to you and your curiosity increasing, that's a beautiful learning experience. That's a true blue example of a good learning experience. Whereas bad learning experience is also very important, and I think we would relate more to bad learning experience throughout our lives than good. It leads to fear, it leads to passivity. In my engineering, during my engineering, I've always been a very curious person. And but my curiosity had to take a backseat because I just did not feel safe in my learning experiences. So rote memorization is something that characterizes the education we've all had till date. Rote memorization is once again a characteristic of bad learning. And of course, low relevance versus relevance. But I must have one important point to state here. Relevance is very personal. Relevance is very subjective. So it's not upon teacher to bring in relevance, but it is also upon the learner to search for that relevance. So the onus, the buck does not just stop with the teacher, the buck also stops with the learner to bring in relevance to whatever one is consuming, one is experiencing. All right, so I just wanted this to be a conversation about what good learning experiences are, what bad learning experiences are, what are the characteristics of the two. But now I must talk about the very question we started off with. What exactly is learning? What is learning? All right. So we have a working definition of learning. Learning has been defined differently across many streams. So there are many streams that have tried to define learning. There is a definition in organizational behavior, organizational learning. Cognitive psychology also defines learning. Behaviorism defines learning. There are constructivist thoughts and humanist traditions about what learning essentially is. I will not bore you with those details, but there are differences across these various streams. But I've tried to synthesize the definitions across these streams. I've tried to come up with a working definition of learning. And this working definition constitutes of three main parts. The first part to learning is how you acquire information or knowledge. All right. So the first part is individuals acquiring information, knowledge, skills, ways of seeing from books, experiences, conversations, practice, observation, feedback, mistakes, tools, teachers, peers, and the world around us. So it is basically about acquisition of information and knowledge and experience. The second part to it is processing this information. Now, processing happens through encoding. When we encode a piece of information, so there is stimulus that we receive, there are cues that we receive from the environment, and our brain encodes it for it to digest it in the way it understands, the way we understand. So that's encoding. And then we store, then we retrieve, and so on and so forth. So that's the process. All right, that's the process part. So we start with acquiring information, knowledge, and experience. Then we process it. And third, and probably the most important aspect, is when this entire process of acquisition and processing of information, knowledge, and learning, it changes our potential behavior. All right. Now, potential behavior is a very strong idea. It's not necessary that whatever we learn or whatever we consume, we apply it immediately. All right. It changes our potential behavior. We have attained enough information and knowledge to be able to apply it whenever the time permits, whenever the opportunity presents itself. All right. So that's potential behavior. And how does it happen? By changing the mental associations and knowledge structures in the brain. All right. So when does a potential behavioral change happen? When the mental associations and knowledge structures they change. All right. So if I have to put it in a line instead of this whole paragraph, learning essentially changes what we can do. All right. So this is why learning is not just about information. Information truly becomes learning only when it is processed. When, of course, it is acquired, it is processed, and it is made usable. All right. Now, the next point is if I learn about negotiation, but I cannot pick up the skills to negotiate better, this learning is incomplete. If I read about typography, but I cannot improve a poster, this learning is incomplete. Now, the third point is extremely relevant to the times we live in. If I read about leadership, but I cannot work well with people, this learning is bullshit. All right, pardon my language. If I learn about leadership, if I read 10 books on leadership, but I am as poor a leader as I originally was, then that learning is useless. If I learn about economics, but I cannot understand the real world choices, incentives, trade offs, that learning is incomplete. And if I ask ChatGPT for responses, I looked at the initial responses. Most of you guys said that I look at ChatGPT to understand, to provide me with an explainer. All right, but I look at that explainer, and if I cannot evaluate them properly, if I can't judge whether it has improved my mental structures, then that knowledge is again incomplete. All right, that learning is incomplete. So when it comes to learning, knowing is not equivalent to doing. All right, you might know a bunch of things, but it will not equate to doing. Just understanding something well enough to even teach it to someone, but not following it yourself, does not count as learning. So you could be a teacher, you could learn a few concepts and teach it to others, but if you don't follow those principles yourself, you have not learned. It's as simple as that. All right. So what does learning do? Learning changes our mental structures. All right. When we learn, we reorganize our mind. A new idea, it becomes extremely powerful when it connects with the older ideas, when we already have a few things and we connect whatever we consume newly to the old ideas. I think one of the other points, one of the responses in the early poll also suggested that there is so much to learn, but I'm unable to find a starting point. All right, there is a lot to learn, but it is very important to make connections with what you have already learned, with what you learn for the first time. So learning gives us new categories, it helps us see patterns, it gives us the bandwidth to ask better questions. It helps us to predict, interpret, and act in our daily life. All right. And the fact that learning is very personal, because if you're sitting in a classroom, everyone's foundational logic, the foundational knowledge is different to start with. So everyone will have different ways of connecting that knowledge to their previous knowledge. So they might be attending the same lecture, but the takeaways, the interpretations might be very different. And that is when I say that when we learn, we reorganize our mind. It depends on what our preset knowledge was, and we connect the new knowledge that we acquire with old knowledge. I'll give you some examples here. Someone who has played cricket, who has bowled pace in the past, when he or she learns Bernoulli's principle, they might connect Bernoulli's principle, the air flows, to swing bowling. Someone who has learned coordinate geometry, who has studied coordinate geometry, and now learns demand and supply, the demand and supply framework, they might connect it to coordinate geometry and hence understand how the shifts and movement along the curves happens. All right. So when you see something new, when you learn something new, it changes our knowledge structures, it changes the categories that we have in our brain, and through that, and as Sam truly says, our application changes based on our lived experiences. So learning then becomes deeply personal, it is deeply subjective, it changes an individual's mental models. And it's an idea that I'll connect with something that is to follow in this discussion. All right. So how do I define learning? How do I summarize? I again reiterate. Yeah. So learning is the whole process of converting information, knowledge, and experience into understanding, judgment, and action. All right. So I'll leave you guys with this working definition to keep it simple. So there are three processes. There is acquisition of information, knowledge, and experiences. We process it, our brain processes it, we process it when we are intentional about it. And the third is that it changes our potential behavior. All right, it changes our mental structures, it changes our knowledge structures. All right, so that's the end of the first segment. I'll take any questions if you have.
Guys, you can unmute yourself and
Yeah, you can unmute yourself. Please ask. You can ask the questions directly.
also on the chat. Yeah.
When we are like we said that our application is usually different based on what has been our lived experience. So connecting from that, how would you say we come up with new ideas from there? Because we can often have it in our subconscious, but I think it takes something extra to actually put it on paper. It doesn't usually come off that easily.
Yeah, I mean, there are no two ways about it. Learning is not easy, first of all, and then applying the learning is as difficult. I mean, I might be saying all of this out in front of you. Does not mean that I'm an expert learner myself. It is difficult, and it requires a lot of intentionality. It requires a whole lot of effort, and what it requires most is practice. I'll come to the point about how we learn towards the end of today's presentation, and we'll discuss a few ways by which we can actually implement whatever we keep on surfacing, whatever we keep on encountering in terms of knowledge, information, experiences. Maybe you'll find some of your answers there, but you have rightly mentioned that learning is not easy. It is not. I mean, at some level, it might happen very automatically, and I'll talk about that as well. But intentional learning and applying whatever we have learned, it's not easy. It's truly difficult, and it takes practice.
Yeah, I think there will be two things, but I will about structure and thinking of those little things that we can apply at that fine moment. Oftentimes, I'm hoarding also, thinking that I'll get to know
Yeah,
that what else I can do from there on.
yeah, yeah.
But I'll wait at towards the end.
Yeah. We all hoard information, which and it is not equivalent to learning. Yeah, we're all guilty of that. I'm guilty of that. I make so many folders after attending lectures, webinars, conferences, and so on and so forth. But I save so much on Instagram, but I rarely go back to those. I mean, to those reels, to those videos. So we're all guilty of that.
Yeah,
No.
it's even note taking that you mentioned at the beginning. I have like multiple notebooks now.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, therein my point. Learning is truly not easy.
Yeah.
All right, fine. So I'll move on to the next part, and I would say this is something that is closest to my heart. The question is, why do we learn? I want a couple of responses.
To understand something fundamentally.
Okay. What else?
It is a psychology to explore and explore new things. That is something we do.
All right. Next.
Trying to solve a problem.
Okay. What else?
Says they are just curious.
You're just curious. So all these actually happen to be the right answers. Although I would maintain that there are no right answers or wrong answers, but these are all the good to haves. These are all the answers that are good to haves. All right. And I will try and classify all these answers into a bucket. All right. So generally, and then of course, it depends on who I'm addressing, who I'm asking this question, and also in what context. But mostly my understanding is, and I look at the students I teach, I look at the people around me, the answer that I get, not by eliciting those explicitly, but through my experiences, is we learn because the society tells us to learn. All right. And here, I'm not looking at the definition of learning that I have put up as a working definition. All right. So there's a bit of ambiguity. There's going to be a bit of ambiguity there. So we study. All right. And we've already maintained that learning is not equivalent to studying, but we study and we think through those studies we're learning because society tells us to learn. We go to school because everyone goes to school. We pursue higher education because it seems like a route to a stable and prosperous life. We collect degrees, we do internships, we collect CV points, and we seek placements because these are the socially accepted markers of progress. All right, that's not wrong. All these motivators, all these whys about why we learn, these are not bad. Education matters. It can actually open doors. It can actually lead to intergenerational mobility, social mobility. So we must not dismiss these motivations, these motives of learning. All these points that I just mentioned, these all happen to be the instrumental motivations. All right, instrumental motivators are those which is basically a means to an end. So when we are thinking, when we have instrumental motives to learn, we are learning because it will lead us to someplace. All right, it will get us the ranks that we are after. It will give us the job that we are after. It will help us choose science in 11th standard and so on and so forth. So this is what instrumental motive for education is. But the main problem becomes when instrumental motive is all you have for learning. All right. So contrary to instrumental motive, the other type of motivation, and it's something that you all spelled out when I asked the question, why do we learn? You all spelled out the intrinsic motives for learning. All right. So what is intrinsic motivation? What are the intrinsic motivators to learn? We learn something because learning itself gives us joy. All right. We learn, and you mentioned curiosity. We learn because we are curious. We learn because we want to understand something better. We want to make sense of the world. We want to solve the puzzles that surround us. We want to become better at something, and we want to truly know how things work. Now, all these are intrinsic motivators to learning. All right. Both motives can coexist and both matter. All right. The problem is not that instrumental motives exist. The problem is when instrumental motives crowd out the intrinsic motivation to learning. Can you tell me this? Why did you study seriously for the first time in your life? It might go back to even first standard. Why did you study?
To pass my JEE exam.
First standard? Oh, okay. You said,
Like the most
okay.
serious.
Till then,
Before that, it was like, yeah.
yeah, till then you were on autopilot.
Yeah, part of the
Yeah.
system.
Yeah. So essentially, I mean, why did you study seriously? Because again, most of us have a recollection of when we study seriously. When it comes to me, I started studying seriously from grade 6 onwards. Till then, it was autopilot aided by my parents. They asked me to learn, so I learned. There were some intrinsic motivators in the form of a pen here, a cycle there, and so on and so forth. Those essentially were the motivators for me to do well in my class. But sixth standard is where I try to make sense of why I am learning. All right, and then comes ninth standard, and you think about, okay, now I have to choose. I have to get science in class 11, so you put in more efforts and so on and so forth. So all those, as we go along in our life, we are just surrounded by these instrumental motivators of learning. All right, but that is not how we began. All right, that is not how we began. As life goes on, as life happens, we all get surrounded by the instrumental motivators, the extrinsic motivators of learning. But that's not how we began. We all began as natural learners. All right, as children, we learn to walk, to talk, to imitate, to play, to communicate, to negotiate. When we throw tantrums as a kid, we are actually negotiating for something. So we all pick up those cues, we observe, and we make sense of other people around us, right? And we do all that not because they'll come up in some exam, not because it will add to our CV, not because someone has promised a placement. We all do this, and I think one of you also mentioned this a couple of minutes back, that we do this because learning is a natural human impulse. All right, we do all this because learning comes to us naturally. All right, but as we move through the school, something shifts, and learning becomes increasingly attached to the external rewards. And herein comes the problem of credentialing. Credentialing is a problem. All right, it is not useless, but too much of it becomes a problem. Now, what is credentials? What are credentials, and what is the problem of credentialing? A degree, mark sheet, certificate, rank, placement record, this all communicates something. These are important. It can act as signal. It can help employers look for good employees. It can help them make decisions. All right, but they become dangerous. The problem of credentialing happens when they start replacing learning. All right, and this happens when we start asking, will this come in exam? Instead of asking, why is it true? right? And I get this. I'm teaching. I've been teaching for 8 years now. I get asked this particular question: will this come in exam? Will this part that we covered, will this come in midterm? Will this come in end term? Rather than actually understanding what it means to them. All right. How many marks will it be worth? Instead of asking, where can I use this? And we often run behind CV points in our in our colleges instead of simply taking a certain experience and looking at it potentially as something that will change my mental model. All right, you're taking part in a fest. Do you pause to ask that the very act of working for a fest or working for organizing a fest, it will help me understand people around me better. It will help me coordinate better. All right. Now, the problem of credentialing is not down to the students. It is the failure of the ecosystem. All right. The schools around us, colleges around us, the coaching classes, families, employers, even the institutional ranking system that we have, all of these feed into credentialing. All right. So learning becomes learning because it is a means to an external prize, that is credentialing. All right. When do they become problems? When they have high-powered incentives attached to them. What are high-powered incentives? High-powered incentives are those incentives if you participate in a certain competition, defeat all others to take that all elusive seat for yourself. All right. It could be the student of the year prize. It could be the best mathematician prize. And here I will bring up the example of Grigory Perelman in a bit. It could be getting an Oscar. It could be n number of different things, but credentialing leads to high-powered incentives. It is what promotes competition among humans. All right. So let me pause here for a bit and let me digress for a bit and talk about Grigory Perelman. Now, this is a story that is very dear to my heart. So Grigory Perelman is a Russian mathematician, and he first rose to fame in 2006 when he was one of the people to win the Fields Medal of Mathematics. Now, Fields Medal, in my opinion, is even more critical than a Nobel Prize because Nobel Prize is given every year, whereas a Fields Medal is given once every 4 years. So he was given Fields Medal, he declined the Fields Medal. Then, most importantly, in 2010, he was given a 1 million prize by the Clay Institute. For doing what? For solving one of the 7 millennium problems in mathematics. So mathematics is a field which has 7 millennium problems. For solving each of these problems, the Clay Institute promises a prize, a sum of, I think, 1 million euros or $1 million. All right. And Grigory Perelman happens to be only person in the world till date to solve one of those millennium problems, and that is the Poincare conjecture. So out of the 7 millennium problems, only Poincare conjecture is the one that is solved. All right, and he was bestowed upon that prize, but he declined that as well. All right. Now, of course, someone as great as him, but it's not just about his eccentricity. All right. It's true that he's eccentric, but there were 2 reasons why he declined both the prizes, the Fields Medal as well as the 1 million Clay prize. One reason is he argued that it will not change my life. This prize does not change my life. It does not change the way I do mathematics. It does not change the way I do my problems. It does not change the way I learn. It does not change the fact that I will still wake up tomorrow and go for mushroom hunting in my farm with my mother. All right. Nothing will change because of this 1 million prize. So it's unimportant to me. The more important reason is because Dr. Perelman argued that he stood on the shoulders of giants in solving this problem. He said that before him, it was Richard Hamilton. I think he's a British mathematician. Richard Hamilton is one who paved the way for him understanding the problem better, and he ended up solving the problem. All right. So he said, it's not just me who has solved this particular problem, so I don't deserve this prize at all by myself. There are people before me who have paved my understanding of the problem better, and hence I could solve it. All right. And he essentially what he did is to simply deny those credentials, simply deny those high-powered incentives. All right. He was not in competition with anyone. And competition is what essentially fuels lesser learning. All right. So when it comes to learning, there can be competition, there could also be collaboration or cooperation. All right. Competition happens when there are high-powered incentives, and that is when people hoard knowledge rather than sharing it with their classmates, sharing with others. All right. And in the language of game theory, this becomes a prisoner's dilemma situation. Please do read about prisoner's dilemma. We don't have enough time to discuss prisoner's dilemma, but there are two strategies in prisoner's dilemma. There is a alpha strategy, which is a competition, and then there is a beta strategy, which is a cooperation. Alpha is individuals doing the best for themselves. Beta is cooperation. All right. And knowledge truly grows when there is cooperation and not when there is competition. All right. So for knowledge to move forward, for us to solve problems of the world, there are many problems of the world. For us to solve the problems of the world, we must cooperate. But these high-powered incentives, these credentialing systems are what essentially stops the way for the progress of the world from happening. So why should we learn? The all-important questions. We should learn to understand the world around us better. All right. We should learn because there is an innate joy in discovery. There is a joy in seeing a pattern. There is a joy when our confusion regarding a concept gets resolved. All right. You think about that problem when you wake up in the morning, when you're bathing in the morning, when you're talking to people, you're trying to find a solution. So there is a joy in you resolving your confusion. There is a joy in looking in reading a book and realizing that the world around you has become bigger. All right. Harry Potter, when you read Harry Potter, you realize there is this entire mythical world. You read Lord of the Rings, you will realize that there is this incredible imagination in the mind of Tolkien. All right. So that's why you learn. And we should learn because we want to live a considered and well-informed life. All right. Because a person who learns well is hard to manipulate. And there are n number of sources by which we can get manipulated. All right. Now, there is this person who learns well is someone who can examine the claims, can ask better questions, can see through shallow arguments, and can have conflicting thoughts saved up in the same mind, is able to reason through those conflicting arguments. So we should learn to live a well-considered and well-informed life. We should learn to solve problems of the world. All right, there are so many problems. There are ecological problems, social problems, technological problems. There are personal problems. There are design problems. The way the world around us is designed. There are policy problems. There are ethical problems. Now, what does learning do? It gives us the mental bandwidth to understand these problems. First of all, it's always understanding a problem, problematizing, and that's my approach towards understanding something as well. We understand these problems and we can design interventions to solve these problems. And we must learn to create. So learn, and then this is something I often tell my students. When they come to the institution, one of the things they worry about are placements. One of the things they worry about are summer internships. And I often tell my students, don't worry about internships. If you learn well, placements, internships are a logical consequence. All right. So the point is, the lesson there is that one must shift the focus from outcomes to the process. If you are doing the process well, your requisite outcomes, the outcomes that you're looking forward to, they'll become a logical consequence. No point in running after outcomes. Do the process better. Learn because there is an intrinsic joy in learning, and it helps you resolve your mental models. It helps you strengthen your mental models. So the question is not about how do I get the highest grade or how will I bag the best possible offer during my placements. It is essentially to ask, what do I now understand better that I could not understand earlier? What can I do now that I could not do earlier? What kind of problem can I see more clearly? What kind of person am I becoming right now by the virtue of my learning? All right, and that's, it might all seem very philosophical, but I would implore you all to maybe come back to this particular these points and reflect upon it, if you've not reflected upon all these points enough. So from what is learning and why is and why do we learn, to where do we learn? All right, now a very simple answer is that we learn everywhere. But which are the places that actually help us learn well? All right, that's a more critical question. That's a more critical question. Now, very simple question to answer. Where does learning begin? We've already talked about it. Learning begins at home. All right, we learn from the environment around us. Learning at home happens to be the first site of learning. It's not the classroom, it is the environment around us. So if a child grows up in a home where people read, ask questions, repair things, discuss ideas, cook together, they manage the money carefully, treat others with dignity, the child is learning. All right, and this might not be education, but the child is truly learning by looking at the environment around him or her. All right, so the first side is learning begins at home. Learning begins around one's environment. Then comes the formal schooling. Then we encounter the formalization of learning. All right, but again, schools are extremely important sites of learning as well. All right, we develop connections. We go from K to 12, and then we go to undergrad school, we go to graduate school. Some of us do PhDs as well. All of this are great sites for learning. All right, but the question I want to ask is, does schooling automatically produce learning? The question is, does schooling automatically produce learning? And my answer is going to be an emphatic no. All right, my answer is no. Schooling does not automatically produce learning. A child might be enrolled in school, but still not learn very well. Child might maintain 100% attendance, but still not understand the concept. A child might actually score a 98% in class 10th and a 95% in class 12, but not understanding the basics of physics. All right, something he or she would have read in class 10th or class 9th. All right, I would not call that learning. Someone who scores 98% or 97%, above 90%, I would not call that person, I'll not call that person out that he or she has learned. So the next point, the next slide. Are we learning well enough in India? All right, that's the important question to ask. Now, over the years since our independence, we have made tremendous progress. Our learning, the literacy levels in India are about 75%, a decent level of literacy. More students, more children of school-going age are in schools compared to the earlier generations. But has their learning enhanced? Is their learning robust? Well, the answer is again, no. And it's not that I say this, it's not believe me when I say this. The evidence point out to this. One of the most revealing evidence of this happens to be from the year 2009. That was the only year when India participated in something known as PISA. All right. Now, PISA holds a standardized tests among 15-year-olds. They test the 15-year-olds on maths, on reading, and on science. Now, there are countries that take part, others do not take part. India participated only once in 2009. They sent a very selected cohort to attempt this particular test. They picked students from Himachal Pradesh and Tamil Nadu because that's where the brightest students come from. And what happened is India finished the second to last position. So out of 74 countries that took these tests, India finished at 73rd, only above Kazakhstan. All right. And since then, India has never again participated in PISA. All right. But we have a more telling indicator of where our learning levels lie as of today. There is an organization called Pratham. It has been conducting ASER surveys for the last 20 years. What it shows is the fundamental gap between schooling and learning. All right, where I say schooling is not equivalent to learning. Many students, again, these standardized tests are given to primary school students, middle school students, secondary school students as well. And ASER has consistently revealed a fundamental gap. Many students who are in grade 3, grade 5, and grade 8, these are the points at which these tests are conducted. They have shown to struggle with arithmetic and reading tasks that are meant for much lower levels. I can give you a figure. Children who are in class 5, 52% of them were unable to solve simple arithmetic problems meant for class 2 students. All right, that's the gap between schooling and learning. All right, and these levels have only dipped with time. Post-COVID, there was a bit of a recovery, but I attribute it to the very low levels that we had reached. So it is a base effect, not something that we should be proud of. There has been some recovery, but again, nothing to write home about. So the point I'm trying to say here, that in India specifically, teaching is not same as learning. All right. If a teacher teaches, but the student does not learn, the activity of teaching has happened, but the purpose has not been achieved. All right. Why? The role of the teacher, and I started off with this, the role of the teacher is not merely to cover the syllabus. All right. The role of teacher is to facilitate learning. And this, of course, involves explanation of concepts, but it also involves fueling the curiosity of the child, providing a safe atmosphere for the child to ask questions, for the child to learn. It involves good feedback. It involves providing the children with proper practice, giving them confidence to make mistakes. It involves reflection. It also involves application. All this is when teaching can translate into learning. All right. So why is teaching not being equated to learning in the current day and age? Sir Ken Robinson, who left us for his heavenly abode in 2020, he provides some very important answers to this. All right. Now, his basic argument is that education system operate with the wrong model of human beings. Education system has a wrong model of human beings around the world, across the world. Some systems get it right, but most of the systems get it wrong. We as humans, we are diverse. We are curious. We are differently creative. But what do schools do? The schools, they push conformity on us. They push compliance on not just us, but also on the teachers. And they focus on standardization. All right. I'm sure you must have come across a meme where there are animals, different animals standing, and they have to take a test of climbing a tree. And the punchline of that particular meme is that a fish cannot be tested on its ability to climb a tree. All right. We're all diverse individuals. Our learning models are not the same. All right. Learners, we as learners, we are diverse. But what does the school do? They treat us as batches. We are curious, but all the school does is to make us wait for instructions. All right. We are creative. We are inherently creative. And I must implore you to go through a famous talk by Ken Robinson, that school skill creativity. All right. But we are all creative. But why do schools skill creativity? Because schools punish errors too early. All right. That's Sir Robinson's point. Why do schools skill creativity? Because they punish our errors. All right. So hence, Sir Robinson comes up with a beautiful metaphor for education. All right. Education should not be a standardized tool. It should be more like agriculture. All right. The farmer is not manufacturing a plant. The farmer is creating the conditions under which the plant can grow. The conditions include soil, fertile soil, water, protection, care, and time. All right. A good learning environment creates these conditions under which learners can flourish. So where do we learn well? We learn well when the conditions allow for learning. All right. The same thing has applied to India as well. We have inherited the Macaulayan system. All right, Macaulay essentially was the reason behind which our education system is the way it is. Our education system is standardized. Our education system is too exam oriented, credential oriented, hierarchical, disconnected from creativity, local context, practical intelligence, and independent judgment. That's what characterizes our education. All right. And because we are depending on the relics of the past, the 19th century and the industrial era model was suited more for people who are expected to follow procedures, obey instructions, and fit into some bureaucratic molds. Now, in those times, the procedural learning, all right, learning can be divided into procedures, learning how, and declarative learning, which is learning what. The system of the yore was built on procedural learning, which is basically follow steps, obey the rules, complete the assigned task, and don't ask too many questions. So we were taught to be subservient, all right? But procedural learning, please understand, is only one part of learning. So if our education system trains us to follow procedures, it simply leaves many other abilities underdeveloped that the current world demands, all right, especially in the age of AI. The world demands better judgment. It demands abstraction. It demands ideas. It demands learning fast. It demands curiosity. All right. It demands problem solving. It demands coming up with a new way of looking at problems and solving them. All right. So that's the problem we are facing. And of course, there are two other problems as well. The problem of attention, as I said earlier in the talk, that attention these days is an extremely scarce commodity. There are so many things that demand our attention. So attention becomes all important. So if we can take care of attention, we can surely learn better. And AI. We'll talk more about AI and learning in AI-mediated environment in the upcoming conversations. But AI, although can be an incredibly powerful learning tool, most of us use AI without any tact, which leads to a couple of things. I'll talk more about this if there are questions around it. It leads to two things. One, it leads to cognitive offloading, which is a smaller problem, but in some cases, there is a cognitive surrender. When does it happen? When we simply ask AI to write our assignment and we simply take that assignment and submit. It has not just happened among students, it has happened in government departments as well, not just in India, but in places like Australia as well. There are bureaucrats in Australia who are asked to write a report. They simply used ChatGPT, and without any cross-verification, without cross-verifying the references used in that particular report, simply published it for the public in the public domain. All right. So we've all resorted to cognitive surrender since the coming of AI. So AI is a powerful site for learning, but it does not ensure learning. Yeah. So before I talk about how do we learn better, let me just finally say it, that where do we learn? We learn when we pay attention, when we process experience, when we connect to what we already know, when we reflect on it, and we allow it to change our understanding, all right, and actions. And that is precisely what learning to learn means. All right. So I think this is a section which probably everyone is most interested in. So the question is learning how to learn. How do we learn better? All right. And we've discussed three important questions, but this is where we become more action oriented. We try to bring in things that make it more actionable for us. Now, my argument in this section is very simple. Learning improves. Our learning improves when we become more intentional about how we choose to pay attention, how we encode information, All right. So there are three brain processes. There is encoding of information. We all receive stimulus from the environment around us. The brain encodes it. So that's encoding. Then the second is storing it. The third is retrieving it. The fourth is connecting it. The fifth is applying it. And all of this leads to a revision in our understanding. And this entire process encapsulates how we can learn better. We have to be intentional enough to pay attention, to ask questions, encode information, storing it, retrieving it, connecting it, applying it, and revising our understanding. So what does it take to do all this? We need to instill curiosity within us. All right? It's not a small thing. Curiosity is often the beginning of inquiry. All right. It is moving on from I saw this, I experienced this, to asking why is this happening? And it is stopping to take the world at face value. All right. When you question the world around you is when you have started to become curious. All right. Now, some of the things a curious person does is to ask the following questions. Why does it happen? How does it happen? What explains this? What am I missing? But then most of us don't ask three very important questions. What are the underlying assumptions here? Where else does this apply? Right? And that's the principle of transferability. You learn something within a certain context and you're trying to understand, you're trying to rack your brains to understand where else can I apply this? And the third very important thing that we often miss out on is the counterfactual thinking. What would happen if these situations were different? What would happen if the situations that I dealt with in coming up with a solution, if the situation itself was different? A very simple counterfactual question to ask right now, those who are engaging with ChatGPT, is to simply ask, if there was no ChatGPT, if there was no cloud, if AI was not a revolution as it is right now, what would I have done? That's counterfactual thinking. So the next question, once we have argued that the prerequisite for learning is curiosity. Now, the next important question to answer is, why do we not retain what we study or read? And again, a lot of us read books, a lot of us take notes, we underline, highlight, but after a few days, we remember very little. All right. Now, this is not any kind of a moral failure or a lack of discipline. All right. This is how simply the memory works. And this is characterized as Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. Now, what does Ebbinghaus forgetting curve tells us? That if we do not engage or actively revisit whatever we have gone through, whatever we have read, then in the early time, right after you study something in the early stages, the memory loss is the steepest. And after some more time goes, there is a bit of tapering that happens. So after we learn something and we fail to engage with it enough, we forget most of it in the early moments. But after some time, the loss of learning, it kind of tapers. All right. Why does it happen? Because the mind, it simply filters out the information it does not need to use. Now, if the brain does not receive a signal that this information is salient, this information is important for us, then it simply treats it as temporary. Then the brain, the mind does not transfer it from your short-term memory to long-term memory for you to retrieve it from long-term memory to short-term memory later on. All right. That's how the mind works. It's as simple as that. All right. And many times we do revisions, and oftentimes when I was in class 10, class 12, students used to tell me, कि मेरा तो 10 बार revision हो गया है. And I often got spooked out. How many? I have not even covered the syllabus once. How the heck are these people revising so many times? All right. I mean, even in today's conversation, in today's webinar, I was looking through my notes till the last moment. So I am someone who just manages to complete syllabus at the last time. But there are people who revise throughout and still do not retain as well enough as I do. I can say that. All right. Why does it happen? Because it is nothing but a fluency illusion. All right. It is nothing but a fluency illusion. Because when we revise something without giving it due credence, we are just depending on how familiar it looks. And we are just leaving our mind to the recognition aspect and not the retrieval aspect. And we commit something known as fluency illusion. Familiarity of the material seems like knowledge, but all that it is doing is to simply make us recognize the content. It is not something that we are actively retrieving. Learning, on the other hand, requires not recognition, but retrieval. So how can we retrieve better? I'll probably talk about, I think, three things. I'll probably focus on three ways to retrieve better, and maybe we'll have the rest of the conversation later. All right. Now, one of the ways by which we can retrieve better is by using the technique of spaced repetition. All right. Now, what is spaced repetition? It means reviewing material at expanding intervals. Initially, you review the material every day. All right. After some time, after the brain recognizes, after the mind recognizes that this material is important, then you can probably take longer intervals to retrieve. All right. Now, I have used this particular technique a few times in my life. One of the times when I felt that it was truly the task of learning something was truly Herculean is in my 12th standard when I was a science student. And back in those days, we had to do something known as salt analysis. Salt analysis is essentially we are given a salt, we have to run tests on the salt, and we have to essentially find out based on the tests what this particular salt is. Now, 2 months before the final practical, I determined that, okay, it is if I simply do rote memorization, it's not going to help. So let me read this material every single day. All right. And I stuck to the task. And I did not do spaced repetition. I simply did repetition. I read the material every single day. All right. Till the moment I could do salt analysis in my sleep. All right. And there comes a shock. And this is an indictment of the Indian education system. On the day of the examination, our teacher already told us all what the salt is, because these are board exams. There are credentialing that has to happen. The teacher gave away the answer even before the test began. All right. But that's the problem with Indian education system. But it's something that has truly worked really well for me. All right. It's again a very difficult thing to do, but it is something that creates that salience of a specific material in your brain. The second is active recall. All right. Active recall as well as summarization. Now, whenever you read something, whenever you attend a webinar, a conference, a class, a lecture, you can just ask these the following questions. What did I read? What were the main points? Can I explain it without looking? What example can I give about those concepts? What did I not understand? All right. It's a simple practice of closing your book and asking yourself these questions. And the summary part is when you're trying to write it in your own words. That's essentially what active recall and summarization is all about. Why do you have to write? Because I've often been told by my mentors that writing is a way of thinking. All right. What does learning do? What does writing do? When we write summary through simply actively recalling something, we are forced, our mind is forced to retrieve. It is forced to select the salient pieces of information. We organize our thoughts and we express it. We articulate it. All right. And this very act of summarization, it tells us whether an idea is clear in our mind or not. So one thing that you can do after you read a book, write a 1-page review a day after you read the book, a week after you read the book, a month after you read the book, and try to think if you're reproducing the same ideas every single time. All right. So that's active recall for you. And the third, and my favorite, and something that has benefited me the most, is the Feynman technique. And this particular webinar is the truest demonstration of the Feynman technique. Now, how can I learn to learn? I can learn to learn when I try to look at the concepts and I try to teach it to others. And that's what I'm trying to do here. All right. So how do you learn to learn? You simply choose a concept. You explain as if you're teaching it to a beginner. And then at that point, take a pause and see where your explanation breaks down. All right. Wherever your explanation has broken down is where you return back to the material. You simplify that concept where the explanation broke down and you refine the explanation. The basic point here, and this is something my teachers, some of my very best teachers have told me, if you can't explain something in a simple manner, you yourself do not understand it well enough. It's as simple as that. So there are complex ideas. You understand complex ideas if you are able to break it down in simple manner. So why does it work? Because it truly combines retrieval, simplification, metacognition, and we'll talk more about metacognition in maybe the next conversations. And there is also communication, all right, articulation. Once again, as I said, writing is thinking, speaking to others, articulating your thoughts is also an example of thinking. All right. And it also gives us a ready feedback of what we do not know. All right. So that's a beautiful feedback to have. What do we not know? How can we learn it even better? All right. So I'm going to stop at this particular point. There were a few other things, but I don't want to overload you all with this. I'm very happy. I'm really happy to convene once again at a time and place we decide on. But at this point, I'll stop and I'll open the floor for questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Kishan. It was a lot of information, I think, but everybody was on board and conversing on the side as well, sharing their experiences. We do have, I think, a couple of questions in the chat that we can take. Guys, if you have any other questions, you could put it in the chat and also, put your hand up and ask these questions by muting yourself.
And I think one thing that you can all do, if you have anything that you want to ask to me directly, I'm going to be giving out my email ID. So you can write to me. I will be very happy to take questions. Again, I'll be using the Feynman's technique here. In order to explain it to you, I learn it better myself. So yeah. And I hope you can record all the chats and please share it with me, the team.
Will do.
Yeah.
Will do. Cool. So I think in the chat we have a couple of questions. Sam, your question that you're going to ask, is it the same one that you asked on the chat?
No, actually, that was different.
Okay. Cool. So you can go ahead and finish yours, and then I can take Shivna's question, and there is one more question after that.
Okay. About you mentioned about hoarding versus sharing, right? So I was thinking, and with the Feynman technique also, oftentimes when I'm studying a lot of things, and there is that one moment where everything connects, right? What if that moment has not happened yet? So then you're hoarding more, trying to see if there is a missing puzzle piece. So that is also why you're not writing, and you're not sharing with others. I'm kind of stuck there.
Yeah, a very pertinent question. And I think one thing that I've not really shared in this is the effective part of learning. And it's not EFFECTIVE, it is AFFECTIVE. All right, the effective element of learning. Effective is basically emotions. Now you're saying that there were these half-baked ideas, concepts that I had, and I was not very confident about sharing it, putting it in front of the world. And that's because there is an emotional aspect there. You're not confident. You're not really confident in asking that particular question, airing that a particular question. It is also because of the ecosystem we have, all right? Because if you're not feeling confident in sharing these half-baked ideas with the others, it's purely because you don't feel that safety. All right, you might feel that you might be ridiculed for those half-baked ideas, but that's absolutely fine. All right, the way to go about it is to simply put it out there. And right now there are so many forums in which you can post your ideas. You can you can write on Medium, you can write on Substack. There are so many areas. If you and you can write anonymously as well. So if you have ideas, just put it out there. And I mean, I might be sitting here saying all these goody things, but I too have suffered from these thoughts in the past, and I continue to suffer. It's very difficult for me to put things out there on LinkedIn, on Instagram. It's difficult even now for me. But that's where the effective part of learning comes. We're scared. Maybe the world, we don't feel confident enough of the world around us to understand us.
And like I'll just have a small ones again about where do we learn. You also mentioned that that information is abundant right now, right? So because of that, it's difficult to find the right information or things to consume. How are you personally navigating that?
So there are a few things that I simply don't go towards. So I don't read newspapers. I don't. I'm not on Twitter. I am on Twitter, but I don't look at Twitter. I am still. I am on Instagram, but what I try to do is to consume things that are challenging. For example, I've been consuming a lot of math-based content creators on Instagram. Even on YouTube, there are things that interest me. Cars interest me, motorsports interest me, sports in general interest me. So I do consume that content as well. But I also try to push myself to watch things that I'm originally interested in. For example, mathematics. So I try to consume those things as well. And what I try to do is not consume information in numbers. I try whatever I'm reading. I'm lagging behind on so many things. I think some of you mentioned there is so much to learn, but we don't know what to prioritize, where to begin, and so on and so forth. Yes, there is a lot of information, but you also have to acknowledge the human limitation of not being able to learn everything. And in that acknowledgement, you have to then prioritize for yourself what do you want to learn. All right. So, for example, I want to learn Gilbert-Strang's algebra next. All right. I've looked at a few videos of Gilbert-Strang, not looked at them completely. So I want to complete that first. I want to learn real analysis. I want to go deeper into game theory. I want to go deeper into behavioral economics. I want to conduct more research on education in India. Those are the things I want to concentrate on.
All right, I'll end with what.
I mean, we have to be selective. We have to be intentional on things we are consuming. It's as simple as that. I have literally no interest in politics, but because you are on all these platforms, you do see those things about politics. I'm not interested in them, so I try to simply put it behind me.
Yeah, just one last thing I'll end with. I think it's one question or two question. But when you're selecting something like that, and it's a pretty broad topic, then how do you define a particular structure is one thing, and the second thing was a form creating these small tasks for each of the things. Otherwise, again, it becomes hoarding information.
I think one of the ways is to simply look at the giants in the field. So if you're learning about design, then simply look at the best designers out there. You could also bank upon your mentors. So mentors play a very important role in trying to point you to the right direction. All right. You can't obviously consume everything. So mentors will help you prioritize. Okay, this is the foundational book. So if I were to recommend someone about linear algebra, I will say that please go and look at the entire playlist of Gilbert-Strang's linear algebra videos. Look at his book. So stand on the shoulders of the giant. Ask your mentors which is the book I should read on this particular in this particular area. If it's behavioral economics, start with Herbert Simon. Look at the works of Daniel Kahneman. Look at Richard Thaler's work, and so on and so forth. So every field will have its exemplar literature, will have the scholars, and you can simply look at those people to guide you better.
Yeah, and for the second part, that finding that very small applicable thing.
All that will happen once you learn the concepts. Once you keep on learning the concepts, that's when application will happen. Once you know the subject well enough, and it's not about reaching a certain inflection point of learning from where you can take off. It's about once you start learning. For example, let's say you're trying to learn econometrics. All right, you learn about regression. You can find many examples around you to apply your learning of regressions. I think one of the ways by which you can learn to apply is use the power of AI. You can develop small simulations. You can ask it to quiz you. You can prepare a small project and so on and so forth. One of the other things one of my seniors told me back in the day is when you learn something, just simply put it out there. The best way is to simply write to the world about what you have learned. All right. And that is the first stage of application, writing about what you have learned.
Thank you, Kishan. That was really insightful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. So now we have a question from Utkarsh also. Utkarsh, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah. Hi,
Thanks
Kishan.
for waiting.
Wonderful session. I just do it very quickly. So I've been feeling recently over past 2-3 years, and that my learning and retention ability has reduced a lot. Like partly due to say social media and the reels and Twitter, everything. I understand this is a common problem that many of us face. I think there's a term for it, brain rot as well. How do we undo that thing? Like, do you have any tips for such a condition, or how we can kind of make sure that the effects are actually reduced and we can come back to how we were previously?
Yeah, very relevant question. I think again, it's a question everyone, each one of us should ask ourselves. One of the ways, see, why it happens is because our cognition, our mental space is limited. All right, and the more information we consume, good and bad, it entails a cognitive load. All right, so there is a load that our brain takes, and that is where if it gets too loaded upon our cognition, we're no longer receptive to new learnings, new experiences, and so on and so forth. All right, because useless information has already made its way into your brain. Now, how do you break this cycle? Now, some people say willpower. You can exercise a lot of willpower and try and overcome these. But again, there is enough literature that has conclusively said that willpower is also limited. All right, willpower is also limited. You might exercise willpower for 7 days, 21 days till it becomes a habit. That's what people say. But at some point in time, the willpower breaks. All right, and you fall prey to the same old patterns, and that is why although we delete apps, we end up reinstalling them. All right, so then I think design, the very area of design, the domain of design gives us solutions. So you can design your life in a way so that you end up consuming less of things that truly distract your attention, things that are useless, and so on and so forth, rather than depend on your willpower. All right, a digital detox is absolutely important. Yes, says digital detox, but again, it banks on your willpower. All right, but what would help, again, I think you can ask maybe ChatGPT or a Claude model, how can I design my life, the environment around me, so that I remain least distracted? And there you have to feed in your context, you have to feed in where you live, how many people you live with, what your life is like, do you study, do you attend work, and so on and so forth. You have to give all that context and simply ask one of these LLMs to design the life around you in a manner which essentially takes willpower out of the equation. Maybe it requires a little bit of willpower, but for most cases, the design of the life around you itself will help you simply ward off all the distractions, all the detractors of our life.
Wonderful answer. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Cool. I think we'll take two more questions. One is Dinesh. He's been waiting for a while. Dinesh, you want to ask your question?
Yes, hello, sir. You said we need to use AI effectively, right? So I may think that I may be using the AI effectively today, but eventually, won't we surrender up to the AI? Do you think humans are always remain in control or something? We are not econs, right?
Again, I think we all take the path of least resistance. Again, we are humans. That's what we do. We all take path of least resistance. But at some point, you have to be intentional in how you use AI. All right. Now, again, it's something I've talked. It's something I've thought about very deeply. How do I prevent AI from running amok? How do I prevent the cognitive surrender that might happen? Now, we will have a separate conversation on learning in an AI mediated environment. So I'll have to think about it deeply and maybe come up with a few solutions that I use on myself, and then come up with those points. But I would, for now, request you to maybe wait for that conversation to happen, because I think we are going to be planning one specific webinar on learning in a AI mediated environment.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So in the chat, we had Shivna who had asked deep focus as a trait versus deep interest in any topic. What is a better motivation to learn?
Deep focus versus
Deep focus as a trait.
I think so. Hard work is a talent. All right. So hard work essentially begets, or deep hard work begets deep focus. You work so hard that you're able to be focused. Not all of us have it. And then I often talk about this example that we all look at Sachin Tendulkar, Roger Federer, Nadal, Messi, and so on and so forth. We say that they've not studied, but they have done. They are the greatest of all times in whatever discipline they have chosen. Now I say, now these are the people who are truly hardworking. I maintain that if these were the people who simply chose academics, they would have simply blown all the competition out of the window. If Messi had given JEE, he would have probably created a record of the marks he scored in JEE. If Roger Federer would have taken up physics, he would have probably won a couple of Nobel prizes in physics, because that's who they are. It's a talent. Hard work is simply a talent. So if hard work is not a solution, then what's the other point?
Deep focus as a trait and deep interest in any topic.
Interest. Then I think we have to fall back on the interest to guide us to our intended learning goals. Because deep focus, again, is a limited commodity. At some point in time, we just grow tired of focusing on something. If you have the talent, you have it. It's as simple as that. All right. If you don't, then you're like all of us. It's as simple as that. But yeah, interest is something that will truly help you. So I think that's why I think to Sam's question, I said that we have to be intentional in what we consume. So if I'm interested in maths, I will simply restrict myself to maths rather than going broad-based. Interest is what will help you keep the interest, to keep it sustained, to keep the activity, the learning activity you're doing sustained. It's as simple as that.
So intention is really important. Like, how do you navigate through it and control yourself and, focus on one thing that you're interested in, and instead of hoarding all the knowledge that might not.
100%. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, this is
Actually, one thing. Can I actually ask one more thing? One thing that I've been also personally facing is about the structure that I mentioned, that I often plan and I make all these plans and there is a deadline, but because it's a self-imposed deadline, so it feels like, okay, it's adjustable, we can move it to the next day or something. But when it's a job or a client, now because my actions will create a consequence on them, so then I'm very aware and very on point with deadlines. But with my own ones, I'm kind of like
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. I get your question, and this is one thing I discuss in my behavioral economics class about why this happens. It has got to do with something known as time preferences that we have in our life. If the impulse is not strong enough, we always end up procrastinating. All right. And here too, design helps. I'll tell you, I'll give you an example of this very aspect. The Evolve team, I'm going to write about it, but Evolve team helped me stay true to this entire process of delivering this particular talk. How? Because it spaced the actionables on my part. All right, the deliverables on my part, it spaced it out evenly. All right, so there was a deadline I was operating with, so I had to give them a few pieces of content of what I'm going to be talking about in regular intervals. All right, so that kept me true to the task. If not for the design, the way Evolve designed this entire endeavor, I would have probably left it all for the last 2 days. I would have still made it work, but it would have not been so comfortable. All right. So the answer to it is again design. All right. So you have to be able to design your ways, because see, if the impulses are not strong enough, if the deadlines are not strong enough, we as humans will procrastinate. That's how we are again wired. That's what makes us humans. All right. So there are three terms. One is front loading of effort. One is back loading of effort. One is even loading of effort. All right. If you have a task, if you're doing everything in the last 2 days, that is back loading of effort. That's what most of us do. Very few people in this world do front loading. All right. And a few more than the second category of people do even loading. All right, they are rational enough to evenly load their actions. Right, that's how we are. It's as
But that happens when there is an external deadline after all, even if there is one.
Yeah,
But
so,
if there is
so
no,
even internal deadlines, it's about how you are designing those deadlines. We all have flouted internal deadlines. So I'm so thankful to the Evolve team here, because that's an external deadline they set upon us. So, there's a beautiful site. I'll maybe share it later. What it does is, and this particular website is designed by a behavioral economist. I don't remember the name of the site. If Dinesh has, if you remember, Dinesh, can you come up with the name of this particular site? Where you take a pledge, where you
Yes, sir. We need to give the commitment device. We need to give
commitment
the
device.
money
So there is, to answer your question, Sam, there is this whole literature about commitment devices. All right. So you have commitment devices to keep you true to your task. All right. So you can probably read about the entire concept of commitment devices to understand this.
all right, I'll do that. And Dinesh, if you can share the site, that will be wonderful.
What about rewarding system and everything in,
Yeah.
in this?
Commitment devices. So rewarding is a part of commitment, of designing commitment devices. 1 second. Let me just do a quick. Yeah. So it's called, it's a website called Stick, STICKK. Let me just share this website with you. This is the website which helps you stay true to your commitments, stick.com.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
No, I think we're good for now.
All right. And it was a wonderful session. And I would express my deepest gratitude to Sonam, Yash, and Yagnesh for making this happen, and all other team members who worked in the background. I think you guys have been truly wonderful, and I look forward to coming back and talking more about this particular topic. Progressively, I think we'll get more technical, and I think, we can leave it at that.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kishan. It was a pleasure. Even when we met you, and right now also, it has been enlightening for us also. Very excited. And we look forward for more collabs, and we'll let all of you also know when are we planning this. We'll have the recording up to share with everyone. And Kishan will also share whatever has been in the chats. We'll share that with you as well. All the experiences. All right. Thank you so much.
Kishan, you mentioned that you're writing also somewhere. Could you share that?
I don't write enough, but I'll take this opportunity to start writing more. I'll probably write about this experience of mine on LinkedIn.
Right, then share your LinkedIn.
I think the organizers would have it.
Yeah, we'll share that with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, guys. Good night and have a great weekend from tomorrow onwards. But yeah. All right. See you guys. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.